Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My first guest is Mr. Wayne Madsen, an investigative journalist from the United States based in Washington, D.C. He used to be a U.S. naval officer who managed one of the first computer security programs for the U.S. Navy, and he used to work for our beloved NSA. Good evening, Wayne.
Hello. Good to be with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us in the show. Now, the reason why I contacted you and why I wanted to talk to you is your article for strategic-culture.org, and your article is called The Charge of the Scientology Brigade. And I have told you this today over the phone, but I have to say it again. Once I published, I don't know, after 5 o'clock local time, that what we are actually going to talk about, it took them 17 minutes to pick up the phone, find me, and tell me that, why are you talking to some American? Why didn't you ask us? Now I'm talking about the Scientologists in the country. The problem is that I wanted to talk to you about your article because, and I'll read just a first paragraph of it. The almost simultaneous rise to power of Yatsenyuk as the acting Prime Minister of Ukraine and Andrej Kiska as the President of Slovakia has prompted fears that the secretive US-based Church of Scientology is making a power grab in Central and Eastern Europe. Now, that article actually was translated into Czech language, which all Slovaks can read, and we have published it as well, so people do know what's inside the article. But what I wanted to ask you, what brought you to this conclusion? You know, what made you to write this article?
Yes, a few things. I've been following various, I wouldn't call these religions, but I would call them cults for many years, because especially those that have a huge political aspect to them. Cults like the Unification Church of Sung Myung Moon, of the late Sung Myung Moon of Korea.
Yep.
That church was very tied in with U.S. intelligence over the years. They began investing and owning newspapers and magazines and other businesses. The same thing with the Church of Scientology, which also has old connections with the Central Intelligence Agency, going back to the mind control experiments that we know about. These are documented, one of which was called MK Ultra.
Excuse me, are you saying that the Church of Scientology was involved in MK Ultra?
Well, its founder certainly was L. Ron Hubbard, and after he founded the church, there were a lot of connections between the Church of Scientology and CIA experimentation. The CIA has always used these types of organizations as testing grounds. We should remember another one that they used was the People's Temple of the Reverend Jim Jones. And many may remember what happened in the country of Guyana in South America, where over 900 people were poisoned by the People's Temple. And it was thought that was also a CIA MK Ultra field test, for lack of a better term. The other thing is I spent some of my time in the Tampa Bay area. One of the cities here is Clearwater, Florida. And Clearwater is the headquarters for the Church of Scientology, which began to move into Clearwater in the 1970s. They bought some property, and then they proceeded to run their own candidates for public office. They started to launch vicious attacks against the sitting mayor, members of the city council. This organization, Scientology, has a very vicious streak to it. They do not like criticism. And I think part of the reason
I noticed.
you received a phone call.
Yes, I did.
17 minutes after going to the web is because they also have quite an intelligence gathering operation. It rivals in some cases, I believe, some intelligence agencies. But if there are old connections, of course, between Scientology and intelligence, that should be taken for granted that they would use some of the same tactics. When I first saw reports out of the Russian media in the Russian language about Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, and his alleged ties to Scientology in California, and then at the same time, I read about this election for president in Slovakia, where the Prime Minister Fico was making charges that I wasn't following that, but it was amazing to see that the same thing was happening in the political arena in Slovakia as what was happening in Ukraine, Scientology being the common denominator. I did a little research into Scientology and found out that some years ago, the police in Athens raided a Scientology office, and they uncovered documents that showed that the Scientologists planned to create a country in the Balkans called Bulgaria. It was going to take in Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, and Yugoslavia. And they came up with this name. And also that the Scientologists, not only in Slovakia and Ukraine, are active, but also in Slovenia, in Croatia, and Hungary. So this is a force to be reckoned with. And obviously the fact that the Prime Minister brought this up about his opponent having ties to people and organizations connected to Scientology played a part, certainly not a major part, but it did play a part in the presidential contest.
But see, it wasn't enough for Fico, the Prime Minister, because he's so hated in the country that anyone, a piece of trash would be running against him. He would have lost anyway.
Yes, and we have a saying for people who may not be the best politicians, but they may say one thing that's correct. We say even a broken clock is correct twice a day.
Yes, it is. Yeah. All right. So, what ties did you find with the Scientologists and, for example, this President-elect Kiska?
Yes, one very interesting connection was that that Kiska was very much involved with a group called the Hubbard School of Administration, and that's named after L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard, I should point out, was not really a religious figure. He was a science fiction writer. He wrote science fiction novels about aliens and outer space and all that type of thing. And also Kiska had some connections with a group called the World Institute of Scientology Enterprises, also called WISE. So these groups are active in Slovakia. This was brought up by Fico in the election. And also Kiska's wrote a book, and it sounds like one of these help yourself to get up type Scientology books, self-help, take life into your own hands. And it was published by a man named Ladislav Pavlik, who owns a management school, the L. Ron Hubbard Management School, and also as a publisher. He published Kiska's book, and Kiska tried to say he wasn't that close to him, but apparently it came out that he calls him by his nickname, Paulie. So it suggests that there's a much closer relationship than between an author and a publisher. All right. What about Ukraine? What's the connection over there? Yes, Ukraine is also very interesting. What we saw happen there after the coup that overthrew Yanukovych. We had Wayne. Let me stop you. What do you think about this coup? Because coup d'état.
we all know, well, most of the people, or I hope most of the people know that there was a huge U.S. involvement.
Yes.
Your country's put, $5 billion since 2004 into this.
No.
Is that correct, this information?
Absolutely, it's correct. And again, we can get into some of the avenues the U.S. uses to influence the political scene in countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, using people like George Soros, for example. But what happened is, and we even saw the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador handing out pieces of bread to the protesters in Maidan Square in Kiev. I've never seen anything like that. And
now, can you imagine that, for example, our politicians would be standing on Wall Street and telling Americans how to fight the tyranny in the U.S.?
Exactly. And I mentioned that and wrote about that. We had Occupy Wall Street, and we had, the police came in and roughed up the protesters who were protesting the bankers and what was going on in our country. Can you imagine? As I said, can you imagine the Russian ambassador and some big official of the Russian government from Moscow giving food out and encouraging the protesters in New York and in Washington, D.C. to basically, get rid of the Obama administration? I think...
Which wouldn't be bad.
It would be quite a diplomatic scandal if that were to have happened. But we do know that there was a leaked phone call made by Victoria Nuland. She was talking to another individual, and she mentioned that she wanted Yatsenyuk as the prime minister. That was their favorite guy. She calls him Yats for short. And then it came out, as I said, in the Russian media that Yatsenyuk graduated from Scientologie's Dianetic School in Kiev in 1998. Now, the Scientologists have a huge presence in Kiev. They're downtown, right next to St. Michael's Golden Domed Monastery of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. There's also Yatsenyuk's work for Aval Bank of Ukraine, the fourth largest bank in the country, and that was acquired in 2005 by Raiffeisen Bank of Austria. Now, Raiffeisen Bank has been linked directly to Scientology scams in Germany. Yatsenyuk's sister was allegedly a member of the group. She lives in Santa Barbara, California. And there were reports that Yatsenyuk met in 2009 with the leader of Scientology, the man who took over from L. Ron Hubbard. He died some years ago, but this guy's name is David Miscavige. So that suggests a much closer relationship between Yatsenyuk and Scientology. Of course, they all denied it. They denied there was any connection. But there was also a report that Yatsenyuk is a great fan of Tom Cruise, who's probably one of the more well-known members of Scientology. Never think that the Scientologists are going to come clean when there are reports about their attempts to infiltrate governments. They were very vicious when they penetrated and tried to take over the city government in Clearwater, Florida. They used all kinds of nefarious tactics, private investigators trying to dig up sex scandals against members of the city council and the mayor, and all kinds of things. So this is not what I consider to be a religion. This looks more like the kind of cult that I've been investigating, and that's been from the Freemasons to the Unification Church and the People's Temple, which is no longer. There's a... So
what are you saying, that they are using intelligence and blackmail and bribe to actually gain influence in the cities and countries?
Yes, they are, and that's their modus operandi and has been for quite some time. Scientology is very big in Hollywood with a lot of these celebrities. And
why is that?
And we have to also look at at the especially the Obama administration, has very close connections to Hollywood. They got a lot of money in their campaign from the big Hollywood producers and big Hollywood studios. And the State Department does an annual human rights report, and now they actually list as a violation of religious freedom any country that violates the rights of Scientologists. Now, Germany and France have always had restrictions on Scientology. They consider them to be a fascist-type organization. And there's laws against fascist organizations in both France and Germany. So for the United States State Department to say that if a country restricts the activities of Scientologists, that they're in some way violating their human rights is really a stretch, because there are laws in Germany and France to not go back to the days of the Nazis, and that's exactly why they have restrictions on groups like Scientology.
All right. Now, if let's say that you are right and both these guys are somehow connected to them, why would the church want to do this?
Well, they're obviously always looking, as I mentioned, there was this plot to create a country called Bulgaria, which the leaders of Scientology themselves said it would become a holy land for the church. They really don't have a holy land like the Jewish religion has Israel, and the Roman Catholics have the Vatican and Rome. This is what their stated goal was, to create a holy land in the Balkans, a super state. And of course, the Greek government found out about it, and that actually prompted the closure of Scientology's office in Athens, and really the collapse of the religion in Greece. So we have a track record with this particular group in conducting its own private foreign policy. Certainly, it's not the only one, but they have a lot of money at their disposal, and that's why I think they represent, say, more of a threat than maybe some smaller cults, like the Unification Church, for example.
All right. Now, I'll ask you this. This just popped into my mind. Actually, we are in a building, or the radio station is in the building, with Mormons. Yeah, there are like one flight of stairs up above us. How would you? Or what could you tell about them? Do you look at them as a real religion, or do you think they are a cult as well?
I think it's also a cult.
Do you?
Yes, I think it's because it's been around a lot longer than these other groups. It has some degree of respectability, but the person who founded the religion, Joseph Smith, was known as basically a fraud.
He ended up really badly back in Chicago, didn't he?
Well, in Illinois, he was captured and hanged for stealing horses. But he was a real con man, and of course, then Brigham Young took over the church, and they moved to Utah. But the Mormon religion is basically a pyramid scheme where, again, it's all about money. You buy into the religion, and depending on how much money you give. Now, all Mormons are supposed to be giving 10% of their income per year to the church, regardless of what they make. So
after tax or before tax?
Yeah, that's after taxes.
After tax.
But anyway, Mitt Romney was the Republican candidate in 2012, and a lot of there's many people that feel that he had no chance because there's still a real hatred for Mormons, especially in the southern United States, where we have a lot of evangelical Christians. For many, many years, the evangelical Christians, I'm talking about the Baptists and the Methodists and some other Pentecostals, they viewed Mormonism as a satanic religion. they would not have anything to do with it. And we saw some of these evangelical leaders in the last election have to kind of change when Romney became the nominee and said, we now embrace Mormonism. They're no longer satanic. They're a good Protestant Christian religion. But for example, the Catholic Church certainly doesn't recognize them, and many churches don't recognize the Mormon Church as a Christian religion because
Slovakia is fairly, almost 80% Catholic, and I know them. So any other religion is a competition. See?
Absolutely, and the thing about the Mormons, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they have their own sort of Bible. It's called the Book of Mormon, and apparently all this information was put into this book by Joseph Smith's writer. Joseph Smith said he found some golden plates that were an angel named Moroni came down from heaven and told him where these plates were, and he got these plates, and they had all this strange language that nobody knew, but he managed to, he knew what this language was, and they wrote this Book of Mormon, and it's it claims, for one thing, that Jesus was over in North America ministering to the Native Americans. There's a lot of things in the real Bible that are kind of hard to believe, but I have to say,
Wayne, that's why it's called faith. See,
I mean, it's we've got religions over here that think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and that they show pictures of Jesus or drawings of Jesus, and they've got dinosaurs in the background. So, so there's a lot of these so-called religions. But the reason we have so many of them, like Scientology and the Mormons and the Unification Church, here in the United States, they're all tax-free. And there
you go.
You can make all this money, and you don't have to pay any tax on it.
All right. Now, where does George Soros, a.k.a. George Schwartz, fit into this picture of the power grab in Eastern Europe?
Yes, Soros, who's from Hungary and is a huge hedge fund tycoon. He's a multi-billionaire. After we saw the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism, he all of a sudden started to invest money in various what he calls civil society groups in Eastern and Central Europe, and everything from newspapers to websites to non-governmental organizations. Money coming from his group called the Open Society Institute, which has major offices in places like Budapest and in Munich.
Wayne, listen to this. Our ex-prime minister, Mrs. Radičová, was a chairman of Open Society in Slovakia.
Yeah, exactly. And you look, it's almost like we've kind of seen that, we have these two guys that have been associated with Scientology, Yatsenyuk and Kiska, but look at how many, as you say, how many other leaders have had a past association with Soros. And obviously the fact is, you've got the Polish foreign minister Sikorski. Radek Sikorski is an old Soros guy. He also was an intern at the very right-wing American Enterprise Institute. So people that say Soros is a progressive and a liberal, that's not correct, because Soros has promoted politicians who have represented the right wing as well. So Soros took over Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty when the CIA decided to privatize it. He runs it now, and they were CIA operations. So Soros, I believe, is a private. It's privatized U.S. intelligence gathering, and it's privatized U.S. Propaganda, and privatized U.S. Interference in the affairs of other countries. I think that's what he represents.
Could he be a CIA asset?
Oh, I think he is. You look at a lot of in 1956, of course. Soros, by the way, was on a program here called 60 Minutes,
I know. Stephen Croft.
Yes, he stated that he and his father, toward the end of World War II, helped round up, identify Hungarian Jews for transport to the concentration camps. Now, Soros also claims to be Jewish as well. So
yes, but he doesn't like them.
Yeah, and he I think Soros is only interested in, first of all, Soros, but also in the agenda that he's represented. Now, many of these people that Soros dealt with early on were part of the operation where, after World War II, the CIA brought a lot of former Nazis from Eastern Europe and nationalists, including the Ukrainian insurgent army, which we see now is rearing its head again in Western Ukraine.
Yep.
They brought them to the United States, and they sponsored something called Captive Nations. And after the fall of communism, many of these Captive Nations people just moved right back into Eastern and Central Europe, and we saw some of them become. One guy became these were American citizens, but one guy became president of Lithuania, and we saw other ones take over power in various other countries.
Now, if you are mentioning Stephen Croft, actually in the interview with Soros, he brought up this fact what he was doing as a boy during the end of the war, and he asked him in 1998 whether he was sorry or he regretted what he did, and Soros told him that there were his happiest days in his life. For God's sake.
Yeah. I mean, you tell people this. Yeah. Obviously, many people saw that interview, and I don't know why that went right over their heads. I know many people that still think that Soros does great things. He's a great progressive leader. He's taking all this money. Remember, he's made most of his money by gambling on the currencies of other countries, and he's caused economies to collapse because of that. He shorts currencies. He plays. It's like a gambling casino, and that's no way to be a progressive leader in causing economies to collapse, and that causes unemployment. That causes all kinds of effects. And I don't believe that Soros is a progressive, but he's given a lot of money to Barack Obama in his presidential campaign, so he has a lot of influence over U.S. policy.
All right, I've got some questions from our listeners. The thing is, you are not, even you are really well known in the United States. You are not really known in Eastern Europe. I would like to mention that. How long had you been hiding from the Obama regime? They were after you, weren't they? A couple of years ago.
Well, I wrote a book called The Manufacturing of a President, where we know least about Barack Obama than any other past president in recent history. We actually knew how many lemon trees grew on Richard Nixon's father's lemon grove in California. we knew how many peanuts were produced from Jimmy Carter's father's peanut farm in Georgia, but we don't know what courses Barack Obama took at Occidental College and at Columbia University in New York. We don't know what he did when he was at Harvard, when he was supposedly the editor of the Harvard Law Review, because we've never seen any article he wrote, which is sort of a requirement. So there's a lot of holes in his background, and I suggest in the book that I looked at Barack Obama's family, the fact he spent time with his mother in Indonesia after the terrible coup that overthrew President Sukarno in '65, and that was done by the CIA. I strongly suggest in the book that the evidence is there that Barack Obama's family and he were very much involved with the CIA. In the case of his grandparents, they even were working for the predecessor of the CIA, a group called the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS.
Well, do you know whether Jerry Corsi found his birth certificate yet? Because He's been looking for it for years now, hasn't he?
Yes. I looked also into that as well, and I'm confident that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. That the birth certificate that was shown, while it has some problems, is probably based on some authentic document. The only thing I would say we might not know is who, when they have the name of his father as Barack Obama Sr., and they list his race as African. That looks like that might have been added much later, because in 1961, Hawaii, which had just become a state, and the entire federal government would not have used that term African as race. They would have used Negro, which was the term then. Caucasian, Asiatic, and Negro. They were what was. So it looks like maybe that might have been altered. And there is some question as to whether Barack Obama Sr. was in fact his father. Maybe it was somebody else, and they added that name at some other time and made an error. But I'm reasonably certain that Obama was born in Hawaii, and that he is qualified on that fact to be president of the United States. Where we get into another issue is he was an Indonesian citizen when he lived there when he was a boy, because his stepfather took out citizenship to get him enrolled in Indonesian schools. And at the age of 18, Obama was supposed to swear his allegiance to the United States, for example, register for the Selective Service, the draft, and do some other things. And there's no real record out there that he did that. So he may have given up his natural-born status when he failed to affirm his citizenship at the age of 18.
All right, I have to go to these questions. Radovan is asking, why is Scientology so dangerous?
Well, I think I think any one of these religious groups or cults that are based really on money, I think that they are dangerous. Because what do they do? What do they do in the way of good works? We can criticize a lot of religions. We can certainly criticize the Catholic Church for what it's, allowing all this pedophilia to happen and not being proactive. But also we have to also look at the fact the Catholic Church does a lot of relief around the world. They provide a lot of assistance for people after disasters. They provide education in some of the most remote places on the planet. But, I look at these other groups, and you don't really see any of that kind of outreach, that type of what we call Christian charity. We see a lot of money making, and even the Mormon Church that doesn't have. Unless it benefits Mormons, you don't see the Mormon Church out in the middle of Africa providing relief to people with AIDS or people that are sick or people that are starving. They might do it for Mormons. They might use it as a recruitment tool. But I think that's why these groups are dangerous, because with all that money, then they can get involved in political.
All right, next question. Who is the largest financial supporter of Scientology?
I'm sorry, who is the
largest financial supporter?
Well, you've got to look again at Hollywood. These actors and actresses make huge amounts of money every time they do a movie, and of course Scientology gets a big chunk of that. I mentioned Tom Cruise, and we have John Travolta is another big Scientologist. Certainly, they're not the only ones. I believe Elvis Presley's daughter got involved with that church, and think of the money involved in his estate. So yeah, most of the money comes from celebrities, but also not just celebrities, but people who are not well known in Hollywood, producers and directors who also make a lot of money, who are also pumping huge amounts into the church.
All right. The last question from this listener is there any connection between the chosen nation and Scientologists?
Yeah, yes. As a matter of fact, I think it's kind of interesting. We can talk about President-elect Kiska, who actually went on the record when all these this information was flying about his connections with Scientology, and he said he dabbled in the past with Buddhism and Judaism. Now, that probably, there's a lot of cross-connection between Scientology and Kabbalah Judaism. You know, that's the mystical Kabbalah. By the way, another celebrity is Madonna, who's very much involved in that. I think if you look at those connections, the Kabbalah connections, people who are involved with that, and Scientology, you'll find the connections between those two particular religions. But, you know, the Kabbalah is rejected by a lot of mainstream Jews around the world. It's it's kind of one of those things that's out there, and apparently it too makes a lot of money from some of their members.
All right. Now, this is the guy is asking about Skull and Bones. Another listener.
Yes.
All right. Is there any connection between the Scientology and the Skull and Bones?
No connection. But remember, the Skull and Bones is a group at Yale. It's an undergraduate group at Yale, but it goes back again. It's sort of like a Masonic type organization, but it's not a mainstream true Masonic. But it's been around for many years, back to the late 1800s. And look, I mean, it's they've got their rituals, they've got their initiation. Very strange artifacts within what they call the tomb at Yale University. They supposedly have the skulls of the Native American chief Geronimo, and they also have supposedly have the skull of a former president, Martin Van Buren. I thought that was a bit strange, and I did a little checking, and it turns out that Martin Van Buren was one of the only presidents who was not a member of the Freemasons. So maybe that's why they have the skull in there. Apparently, they also managed to get a hold of Hitler's private silverware during, captured from Germany in World War II, and at some of their dinners, they eat with Hitler's silverware. It's a powerful organization. In 2004, John Kerry and George W. Bush ran for president of the United States. Both were members of the Skull and Bones, and NBC has a new show called Meet the Press. And the late Tim Russert, the host of that show, asked both Kerry and Bush about the Skull and Bones, and both of them said they would not answer any questions about that because it was a secret.
It didn't really matter which one won. Now we've got like 5 minutes to go, because I know you've got another interview in like 15 minutes. The last thing I would like to ask you about is, it's well known that if you have any information, you have to get it out as soon as you can. If you have any information, you sit on it, bad things can happen to you. Now, if you have any information, you tell the world you have it, and you still sit on it, bad things for sure will happen to you. I'm talking about Andrew Breitbart. I know he was your friend. He passed away, 2 years ago, on first of March in 2012. Now, if you could just tell us, what happened a couple of weeks before, in February, when he publicly announced the video, which I haven't seen yet, and what happened then on February, or last day of February, or the first day of March 2012. For the listeners, Andrew Breitbart was a publisher, a commentator for the Washington Post, and author as well.
Well, Breitbart, he wasn't a friend of mine, but I had seen him just a few days before he died at what's called the Conservative Political Action Committee Conference, CPAC, in Washington, and I covered that. I'm not a conservative, but I cover all these political events. And he said he had a video that was going to be very revealing about President Obama, and then he dropped dead of a heart attack out in California a few days after making that announcement. So My take on it is look at that, and many times we're told people die of natural causes or even suicide, and I've checked many of these so-called suicides, and it looks, later on it turns out that the bodies have been cremated, the evidence has been destroyed, and it looks like they were murders. As a matter of fact, there's been quite a few so-called murder-suicides and suicides of big bankers, especially in Europe and here in the United States recently. I've lost count. The last one was a bank president in Liechtenstein was shot by some other banker, and they said it was one of these murder-suicides where then the guy shot himself after he shot the banker. There was also the case in the Netherlands, the head of ABN AMRO Bank in the Netherlands supposedly shot himself and shot his wife and handicapped daughter. It's an epidemic of banker deaths all of a sudden, and you have to look at these and not go with the way the media is reporting.
What do you think about Breitbart? Because it's a huge coincidence that he says that, oh, all right, I've got a video of President Obama. It will show he's a communist, yeah, and then he dies, suddenly. And the other thing is what nobody's talking about was the forensic photographer in California who was poisoned.
Yes. Well, again, this stuff tends to get swept down the memory hole after a while, and I mean, I don't believe that Obama's a communist. I think he's actually an asset of the Central Intelligence Agency. That's not to say that they didn't use communists as informants, and certainly Obama's record indicates that he was used to infiltrate a lot of leftist groups at Occidental, the Marxist Club, and he infiltrated some Black Power groups in Chicago. But I think he was doing that because he was working for U.S. government intelligence and law enforcement agencies. But again, when you've got a lot of exposure as Breitbart had, I mean, he in the right wing world, he could get on. He was on radio and television quite a bit. And he made that kind of announcement. He obviously is going to bring a lot of attention on himself. And one thing I do know about the Obama administration, it absolutely abhors that sort of attention. They do not like Obama's past being brought up at news conferences. Anyone who brings up anything about Obama, and especially the birth certificate, which I believe he was born in Hawaii, but that's a good way to lose your press credentials, anyone who would bring up those issues during a White House press conference.
All right. Okay, now, yeah, well, it's what I would like to ask you. There are quite a lot of issues and a lot of things you covered or you have covered and you are looking into. I would really appreciate if you could come on, for another half an hour, 40 minutes in a couple of weeks or a month, if it's all right with you.
Absolutely. Be happy to.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
Okay.
Thank you again, and take care of yourself.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And that was Wayne Madsen,